What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is up, Fantasy Points? We are back, season 2 of Outside the Box. Last year, kind of an experiment to start. We weren't sure how long. We didn't even know if we were going to be able to do the show the entire year. Feedback was immediately phenomenal for this show, though. People were hyped for it. I never had more fun doing a DFS show than Outside the Box last year with my friend Scott Barrett, who does deeper dives into NFL data than anybody I know. A great eye towards what matters for fantasy football in general. Really excited to be back doing Outside the Box with Scott Barrett again. Scott, I mean, we've talked quite a bit this summer. We've done a lot of content together, so it's not like we haven't seen each other in 9 months, but I'm hyped to be doing a DFS show with you again. I know you're super busy week 1. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, super busy. Just launched Ass. I don't know if you guys have heard about Ass. It seemed like everyone was talking about Rashad Bateman's ass this week, but literally think it's like a revolutionary stat in the world of football analytics, like baseball analytics. That's where I came from. I started as a baseball writer. So good and such an oversaturated market. That's why I pivoted to football. It was easier. And this is going to be such an absolute game changer, I think, for everyone. So a little busy with that, but still feel really good about this slate. Still really excited to do this show. It was crazy. You know, our last episode was January. And then every single week for the, 8 months since, we get, hey, are you and Neil still doing that show? Yeah, we're going to do that show. It's going to be over at Fantasy Points. Hey, are you and Neil still doing? All right. Then we launched a video. And it's still every couple of days the past few weeks. Hey, are you and Neil? Yes, we're back, baby. We're back, bitches.
I've never been a part of anything like it where you get that question so regularly. Are you guys going to be doing Outside the Box again? So many people have told me it's the only DFS content they consume for the entire week, which is just awesome to hear. Really, really fun to be a part of something like this. And I think that will be, even better going forward. Every week, I think we get better with the show. This year, one thing that we did cut out is the survivor pick stuff. We did that kind of early in the year last year. Nobody seems super into it. I think people show up for DFS advice. So we're going to stick to what people seemed to want, which is the DFS advice. We'll be going position by position. Start with looking at the chalk, because I think that kind of gives you the context of the slate, starting by looking at, okay, who's going to be chalky on the slate, who's the good chalk, who's the bad chalk, and then we'll go into some more contrarian plays at each position. We'll start quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. Maybe we'll talk about defenses a little bit, and then we'll make some lineups at the end. We'll make some DraftKings lineups. Should be a fun time. But we're gonna jump in to start with quarterbacks. And I was just directing myself to the Fantasy Points ownership projections, but I think the chalk of the week is going to start with Anthony Richardson. Now let me pull this up the exact.
Wrong.
Okay, I'm wrong. Okay, let me pull up the. I was looking on the projections page, and I just
pull up
right as we were
our
starting. I'm on the wrong page. All right,
click on DFS.
DFS
to the left. NFL projections.
Yep, I'm there. I don't see the ownership projections. So
okay, don't do that. And now click on fantasy points per dollar.
Fantasy points per dollar. Okay. Fantasy points per dollar.
That's the highest owned quarterback of the week.
Yeah. Now, I mean, that's new. Okay, so that's new. Justin Fields is the
go to research and reports.
Yep. Okay. Research and reports.
DFS ownership projections.
DFS
in the middle.
There we go. Yeah.
So Chris Wecht, he initially started off for Brett Wayfield as a charter many years ago. And then he just became this computer genius where he can code in R and Python, amazing with analytics. And he really expanded into that role. And he's legitimately one of the smartest people I've ever met. And I am just so who has the best DFS projections in the space? It's Derek Carty of the Blitz. No one else comes close to that. ETR, FTN, 4-for-4, whatever. No one comes close to Derek. And that pisses me off. And so I'm coming for his crown this week. We segued Chris Wecht, absolute genius, into a full-time projections role. So I think we're going to have, we're going to stay competitive at the very least, but I'm coming for that crown. And not just that, but our projections are going to be updated consistently. I think we were fastest to update Yoshi, fastest to update Justin Fields. And remember, Fantasy Points data has the best NFL analytics in the game. We have access to more data. We know exactly how predictive various stats are. And so when you have the best data, you're going to have the best projections. So I'm really bullish about our projections this year. And like we were just talking about, Justin Fields far and away the top quarterback value of the slate. I think he's going to be the highest owned. And shout out to Darren, who does our ownership projections. We had pretty sure we had the most accurate ownership projections, but he can clarify in Discord if you want to ask him. But also very quick with updating those as well. So
yeah, I mean, I am super excited to look at this. Have not pulled up the data suite yet, but we'll take a look at some data suite stuff. I'm sure throughout the show we always end up looking at the data suite a little bit. I do want to mention you can use promo code, if you can see down there, OTB. I'm pointing the wrong way. OTB20. You can get 20% off anything at FantasyPoints. That includes the data suite. That includes the projections. Whatever you want, you can get 20% off using promo code OTB20. Supports this show. We've also got the little what do you call that? The little box down there. You can put your phone up to it. It'll send you to the promo code. That's bottom left of the screen as well. So different ways to access the promo code if you want access to the FantasyPoints data, content, the data suite. I mean, it's great stuff. And I should mention, I mean, you talk about the data. That is a big part of what we're looking at here. But part of what sets FantasyPoints apart is really, really sharp people digging deep into the FantasyPoints data suite. So, if you don't want to dig into it yourself, there's a lot of great content on the site as well, digging into that data for you.
Yeah. So this show is like largely built around my slate breakdown article, which someone did a study on this last year. They found it was the far and away the best at predicting players to be on the winning Millie Maker lineup. I write about a lot of guys, to be fair, but I also had the best hit rate on the players I did write up, which is like insane because I write up like legitimate 0.1% owned Galaxy Brain plays and stuff like that. So subscribe to FantasyPoints, check out my slate breakdown. At a certain point, I might have to start, I'm not going to do it this week, but I might have to start like paywalling plays where it's like, otherwise the guys in Discord are going to get too mad at me. So, maybe next week it's like, oh, this guy's 3% owned. I think he's a cash play. I'm all in. I can't mention him, but this week, yeah, we'll give you the goods.
All right. So
and we'll try not to be obnoxious about that. I know that stinks for the viewer.
Yeah. So Justin Fields. Now this is new as of today. We got the reports that Russell Wilson probably not starting. I know he traveled with the team, but it sounds like it's going to be the Justin Fields show immediately this week. He is 5,000, which is, I think, the min price for a quarterback these days on DraftKings. You're never going to see one cheaper than 5,000, I believe. So you've got an elite rushing quarterback is the minimum price. He's, as a result, going to be pretty highly owned, projecting here for 22% ownership in large field tournaments. How do you feel about Justin Fields at the Falcons at 22% ownership, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, he's an amazing play. He's a must play for cash, obviously. Since week 7 of 2022, he averages 21.3 fantasy points per game. That's behind only Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes. He's only 5K. Sure, he's not good at football, but he's great at fantasy football because of the rushing volume, the rushing production. Averages 64.3 over the last 2 seasons. And like Arthur Smith, like Ryan Tannehill averaged 4.3 rushing fantasy points per game in 2020. Mariota averaged 5.2 in 2022. So that seems like a good fit. I will say, like, we shouldn't be expecting like Chicago levels of production just because Arthur Smith is like World War II era levels of run heavy, slow paced, gross football. And so you could poke holes in him from a GPP perspective fairly easily. It's like, is the slate wrecking ceiling really there? Obviously still the best point per dollar play, but you can get away from him if you wanted to be more of an outside the box contrarian GPP player.
I think I'm going to get away from Justin Fields. I think, 22% ownership. It's hard to really want to stack him. Now, he could absolutely wreck me with like a long bomb or two to George Pickens. Obviously, he's done it before with DJ Moore, like against the Commanders. I think that was last year when they absolutely broke the slate. So, we know that it's possible for Justin Fields to break the slate. But if he's going to be chalk, I think I'm going to play it the other way, and we'll talk about defenses later. But play the Falcons defense against Justin Fields feels like a pretty good idea to me. I don't know. I think
he might be even more chalky. That might just be a great stack.
Yeah, playing Justin Fields and the Falcons defense. I mean, that's where maybe you get a little bit different by doing that.
That might be the only quarterback where you get guaranteed positive correlation.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I look at all the other quarterbacks on the slate. I feel like we have enough like inexpensive quarterbacks on the slate that there are ways to get away from it pretty easily. So I think I'm more inclined to be pretty significantly underweight. I don't know if I'll full fade Justin Fields, but I think I probably will end up pretty significantly underweight if he is going to be 22% owned, because the quarterbacks for the most part are really well priced across the board. Like it's just they're not too expensive. So you really do need Justin Fields to be, one of the highest scoring quarterbacks on the slate for this to work out. So yeah, I think I'm more inclined to fade Justin Fields at 22% ownership, even though he is very obviously a great point per dollar play. Okay, so I said Anthony Richardson. You gave me a hard time for saying that I thought Anthony Richardson would be the chalk, but he is the number 2 projected highest owned quarterback here. 18% projection, 6,300, facing the Texans, who I think are going to be a pretty good defense, but should have to throw the ball a bit to keep up. How are we feeling about Anthony Richardson this week?
Yeah, I mean, he would have been my cash quarterback had Russell Wilson remained the starter. Like, look at the top 3 quarterbacks; those are easily like the top 3 point per dollar plays. I'm going to have some exposure to all of them probably if I make a number of lineups. But yeah, probably underweight the field on Richardson Fields, just looking at that projected ownership percentage. If you want to get away from him for tournaments, like all you really need is like a compelling counter argument. Like there's an easily compelling counter argument for Anthony Richardson, who has made 12 starts since high school. He didn't look great in the preseason. He had that practice against the Bengals where they were like openly mocking him, like this guy doesn't know how to play football. Yeah. And he had like 3 completions the whole practice. But the bottom line is, I mean, this is my Exodia quarterback last year. I had like 100% exposure to him in best ball. He averaged the most fantasy points per 4 full quarters of any quarterback ever, easily led in fantasy points per dropback. He just ran bad with injuries. And so rushing production, like such an absolute cheat code. He's clearly mispriced. You can say Josh Downs is out. That doesn't help. Michael Pittman could be, I don't think he will, could be shadowed by Devin Stingley. Then that's a horrible matchup and he has like no one to throw to. But yeah, he's a good play. 18% certainly seems right. Personally though, I have Jaden Daniels just a hair above him, who's my Exodia quarterback this year.
Right. Love it. All right. We're getting right into it. And Jaden Daniels, I mean, he's, I think we cut off the chalk at like 15% typically, but then we get into the less chalky plays. Jaden Daniels kind of right on that border. We're projecting him for 13% ownership. He's only 5,700. So is he this? I mean, you say he's one of your Exodia plays this year. Is Jaden Daniels an Exodia play for you this week? Are you going to be playing more than 13% of Jaden Daniels, do you think?
I don't know. I'm not an MME player, remember, so I don't really know ownership. It's my own ownership, especially like on a Saturday afternoon. He was like, I feel so strongly about the player. I'm so convicted in the player. Won Heisman last year, averaged 40 fantasy points per game. That was the second most since 2016. 1.2 fantasy points per dropback, second most since 2014. And he's first quarterback since Vince Young to lead the FBS in yards per carry last year. And then you combine that with Cliff Kingsbury's fast-paced, up-tempo, no-huddle offense where we've seen Kyler Murray rack up a ton of rushing fantasy points. It just seems perfect. Not where the matchup honestly looks pretty good. And so like an argument you can make for Richardson and Jaden Daniels is like they're both very easy to stack. Richardson would be Pittman or Adonai Mitchell. Jaden Daniels is Terry McLaurin, the end, right? So yeah, I feel good about all these guys, but I'm still deciding how off the wall I want to be. So we didn't talk about this from a macro perspective, and we probably should have. What do we always see in week one is we see like the field massively overconfident when really, what's the point we know the least? It's going to be week one. And so I think this is a good week to go like totally OTB outside the box, off the wall. The issue is that I love these guys. Fields is my Exodia 3 years ago. Richardson 2 years ago, or 2 years ago. Richardson last year. Daniels this year. So those are all my guys, and they're all badly mispriced.
I like that you're trying to make OTB happen.
It's gonna happen.
I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen. Maybe it will happen. OTB might happen. But I do think I agree with you. This is the week. Every week in large field GPPs is the week to go OTB. But I think especially week one, where you're right. Everybody is overconfident in what they think will happen. Chalk is going to miss quite a bit this week. There are going to be some 2% owned plays this week that in 3 weeks are going to be like, how the hell was that guy 2% owned? So I think getting outside the box is always important, but especially important in week one.
So I see a lot of that this week. I like Caleb Williams. I like Trevor Lawrence. I like Baker. But why would I play them when I'm seeing guys with maybe not the same point per dollar value, but similar upside, maybe identical upside at 1%, 2%. So I think that's how I'm going to attack it. I think in single field, smaller entry, I'm going to have these Jaden Daniels teams, and then larger field, try and go totally off the wall.
I think paying up for quarterback is going to be sort of contrarian this week, just because, as we mentioned, there are so many great values on this slate. It's hard to think that they're all going to miss, just be bad plays. Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, Justin Fields, as you said, Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence, Baker Mayfield, so many $5,000 to $6,000 quarterbacks. Somebody is going to put up a good game. But I think it'll be contrarian to pay up at quarterback, and maybe get a quarterback who still outscores them by 10 points. But we'll talk about some of those options as we go. I do want to touch on this question from Chris Oster. It says, I know Neil is going to hate my question. No, I don't hate the question. I think it's a great question. I like these kinds of questions because I like talking about them. But he says, but I was wondering, for A-Rich to hit his ceiling, which is rushing touchdowns, can I run him solo with Texans wide receiver bringbacks? I was thinking of doing that in a tournament. I guess I can answer first. My answer is always probably not. I like to stack up my quarterbacks, and it's not because they can't be optimal unstacked. Certainly, Anthony Richardson could score a couple touchdowns, be the optimal quarterback unstacked. But because I'm trying to limit the number of things I need to get right, I like to always stack my quarterbacks, just kind of make it a smaller parlay that I'm trying to hit. So even though I know it is possible for somebody like Anthony Richardson to get there, maybe even more likely for him to get there without a stacking partner, every quarterback that I play, probably in all my lineups this week, I am going to stack for large field GPPs in particular. A smaller field GPP, you don't need to be as perfect. You can maybe get away with just playing a little bit chalkier, not trying to hit this massive parlay. But for large field GPPs, I'm always inclined to just limit the number of things that I need to get right. So I like to stack my quarterbacks, double stack a lot of quarterbacks as well. I know Scott, though, in best ball, did not allow me to stack in some of our best ball streams. So maybe has a little bit of a different perspective here. Scott, what do you think? Can you run out?
No, you're absolutely stacking A-Rich this week. This is the week to do it. So Michael Pittman averages 1.8 times as many fantasy points per route run when Josh Downs is off the field. And then you have Adonai Mitchell at basically minimum price. So easy.
Yeah. Very, very easy to stack Anthony Richardson. But yeah, that's a great question. Glad to have gotten that one in early in the season. All right. So it sounds like you like Jaden Daniels the best of the top three, would you say?
I mean, at that ownership, yeah. I have to be honest. This show is going to be tougher for me this year. I liked it better when we were using Stokastic's ownership because Fantasy Points ownership is a blend of our values, and so I feed into our projection. So
right. So it's a lot of
tricky. It's going to be a lot of they're chalky, but I do love this guy.
Yeah, no, that is reasonable. That you're going to like the ownership numbers better using the Fantasy Points data, but maybe we'll find some outliers throughout. Caleb Williams, I think it might be a tougher matchup than we're anticipating against Tennessee. I know they were not great last year.
They're underrated. That's an underrated defense.
So what do we do? But Caleb Williams, number one overall pick, obviously has great passing weapons. How do you feel about Caleb Williams being chalky this week?
Yeah, and even if the defense is underrated, it's Brian Callahan's fast-paced, up-tempo offense is going to lead to more play volume overall. This is a generational quarterback, supposedly with a generational supporting cast. He's not priced like it, but again, like I'm fine fading him just because look at all these. Look at Dak Prescott at 2% or Tua at 3%, CJ Stroud at 4%. So I'd rather just go all the way to the bottom than when the field is 12%.
All right, well, let's open it up to favorite GPP plays, and I certainly have some thoughts on GPP plays that I really like this week. But I'm wondering if you're going to throw any names at me that I have not really considered or that I, haven't liked to this point. Any under sub 10% owned quarterbacks that really stick out to you as players you want to be in on this week?
Yeah, so I have a lot of them. Number one, far and away, is CJ Stroud. I mean, what are we doing?
We're on the same page. We're on the same page.
What are we doing here? He averaged 28 DraftKings fantasy points per game in his top 50% of his games last year. As a rookie, he smashed Indianapolis. He shreds cover 3. Like literally, look at the top 5. Go to the Fantasy Points data suite. You don't actually have to do this, Neil.
Okay.
Go to the Fantasy Points data suite. Advanced receiving. Click on cover 3, and sort the wide receivers by yards per route run. It's like Nico Collins 2, Tank Dell 4, Stephon Diggs 5. All these guys smash cover 3. Indianapolis runs cover 3 at the second highest rate in the league, or at least he did last year. Stroud top 3 in fantasy points per drop back against cover 3. So it's an ideal schematic matchup. Massive upside. What was the cheat code last year? I know these guys all I know Stroud got priced up, but like, what was the cheat code last year? It was you need one Texans receiver on every single lineup, and you need heavy exposure to Stroud plus 2 pass catchers with like the MME randomizer on, just because it was tough at certain points to pick the exact 2. And like, let's just go back to that, right? So I don't know what the field's thinking with his ownership so low.
Yeah, no, Stroud has been a slam dunk for me all week. 4% projected ownership here. Though I do have concerns about the actual ownership, because I feel like, every piece of content that I've done this week, I brought him up, but then everybody else has been on him too. Every content creator I know is like, oh my God, CJ Stroud is an absolute smash this week. So whether he's actually going to come in at low ownership, not totally confident that he's going to come in as low owned as the algos might suggest. But if he does come in anywhere under like 10% ownership, I think it's a slam dunk to play CJ Stroud this week. And probably even a little bit more than that. I'm going to have quite a bit.
Do we want to talk stacking partners with these guys, or do we want to save that for the wide receiver section?
I think we could, briefly touch on stacking partners, and then we'll go deeper once we get to the wide receiver section.
All right. Well, just remind me later to go deeper on Houston's wide receivers, and then the bring back again, Pittman or Adonai Mitchell.
Sorry, say that again. So your preferred stacking partner with CJ Stroud is Nico Collins? I was reading chat. And it didn't.
I said remind me to go deeper on Houston's wide receiver.
All right. Cool. All right, we'll do that when we get to wide receiver section. We just got a question about Geno Smith. He is 5,500 facing the Broncos this week. How do you feel about Geno Smith this week?
Yeah, we're higher than anyone in the industry on him. That's really a Chris Wecht play. I think he's underrated. I think he's like underrated from an NFL standpoint and a fantasy standpoint. He leads all quarterbacks in completion percentage over expectation over the last 2 years. Ranks 10th among all quarterbacks in games with like 23 DK points. This is a bottom 3 defense, so it's a great matchup. Offers some leverage on a chalky Kenneth Walker. The stack, I guess, is easy because Lockett's banged up, Fant's banged up, JSN popping as a top value for us, DK Metcalf. I'm probably not going to go there on my own lineups, but I did write him up, and that is a Chris Weck play. So I did spend a few minutes at the start of the show hyping up my guy Chris.
Yeah, as you should. Chris deserves all the hype. I think we need to, even though he's not chalk. Josh Allen projects the best on the slate. Actually, I should pull up the projections here. We're sort of by fantasy points, we're projecting for nearly 4 fantasy points better than CJ Stroud. Now he is 8,000 also. But we're all super into CJ Stroud. Josh Allen facing Arizona, not a very good defense either. Maybe a solid offense on the other side. That game could end up being a shootout. how do we feel about Josh Allen this week? And I don't think his pass catchers are going to be super chalky either. So I don't know. He seems like maybe we're overthinking it. Maybe Josh Allen is just the play. What do you think?
Yeah. So Arizona has the worst defense of any team in football this year, at least on paper. Like bottom 4 DI group, bottom 4 edge rushers, bottom 4 linebackers, bottom 4 cornerbacks, middle of the pack safety group. And it's Josh Allen. He outscored all quarterbacks by 2.2 fantasy points per game last year. He's been the top quarterback by fantasy points per game in 3 straight seasons. Highest implied point total of the week. So like, what are we doing? How many times do you have to learn this lesson where we all forget about Josh Allen and then Bills fans 69-420 wins the Millie Maker?
Yeah.
So I'll say the tricky thing with him is figuring out who to stack him with.
Yeah.
Our guys are team Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid, I guess, would be a little more obvious. I had a trickier time with it. But I probably like Shakir plus the Trey McBride bring back.
What do you think of Keon Coleman this week? Is he going to get enough run to be playable?
I don't know. I wouldn't play him, but I don't feel strongly about it either way.
Okay, I guess we can talk more about the Bills receivers.
He could be a 2-touchdown guy with like 45 yards.
Yeah, I suppose. All right. I think similarly, like this week, the chalk at wide receiver, and maybe I'm wrong about this once we get to the wide receiver section, but from what I've seen, it seems Tyreek Hill is going to be pretty chalky at wide receiver this week. Yet Tua is 3% projected ownership, and I think that is a result of the $7,000 price tag. There are, again, so many cheap options. It's hard to want to pay up at quarterback with all those cheap options. So then I think it's a way to get contrarian. It's a very much a pay up to be contrarian week at quarterback. How do we feel? And Tua is $500 cheaper than CJ Stroud. I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. We've seen Miami put up major points early in the year. Last year, they put up like 37 points per game over the first 6 weeks. Just absolutely insane. Any interest in stacking Tua this week?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's the highest over-under of the slate. Miami has the second highest implied point total. Everyone wants to play Tyreek. Everyone wants to play Devon A-Chain, who's great pass catcher out of the backfield, and no one wants to play Tua. Miami has maybe the best offense in football. They put up a lot of yards. They score a lot of points. It's just that the bulk of those typically come on the ground. Really like a freakish rate of touchdowns on the ground last year. They're due for regression in that regard. Tua led all quarterbacks in passing yards last year. He just didn't have the touchdowns, but there were those games we saw where he got those touchdowns and he was on the winning Millie Maker lineup. And so, stack is easy. Drawing contrarian ownerships, and look at winning the quarterback on the winning Millie Maker lineup over the last 2 years. Tua has to be top 3 because he does have that immense ceiling when they are airing it out. I like him. I think that's a great call. You see Trevor Lawrence up there, and we know opposing quarterbacks are positively correlated.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think we saw it really last year, but I feel like 2 years ago, there were 2 or 3 instances where the Tua double stack just absolutely dominated with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So I think being a year removed from that, maybe fewer people will do the double stack. That is sort of interesting to me, doing the Tua double stack, hoping that they just go completely off. Definitely one way that I want to play it this week. Another game that I feel like it's not projected for a ton of ownership, but that everybody is talking about is Vikings Giants. Both Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. Everybody thinks that nobody wants to play them, but then everybody's talking about them. So I sort of wonder if the ownership gets a little bit higher. Are you interested at all in either of Daniel Jones or Darnold?
Yeah, I wrote up Darnold and then I deleted him. If Darnold leads the league in passing yards this year, I win $25,000 on $100 bet because the Vikings team led the league in passing yards last year with like scrub backup quarterbacks comprising 9 of those games. Nick Mullins averaged like 370 yards per game over his last 3 starts. And so I really just think it's like a Kevin O'Connell thing. They lead the league in dropbacks every year. It's a better defense. It's not a great defense. Not even a good defense, I don't think. And so I liked it. But ultimately what it came down to for me was that TJ Hawkinson's out, Jordan Addison's hurt, Jalen Naylor's hurt. And so what do you do if you're the Giants? You just quadruple team Justin Jefferson. And like Darnold, I don't think is very good. That was just like, I was getting like 100-1 odds or whatever it was. So I wrote him up and then I deleted it. Okay. But I mean, it makes sense. You get playing Jefferson, you get leverage off of Tyreek Hill. You have similar upside. Jalen Naylor is an ass god, so minimum price, so that's fun. And Munt is a really good value, so that would be your pool to work with. Close spread implies shootout potential. I could see that game being a slop fest. What I call a slop fest is when like two teams who suck just get into this like crazy high scoring shootout. But yeah, ultimately I wrote him up and then deleted him, so not going to play him.
That's always a good sign when you write somebody up and then delete them. That's usually the player that you need.
I know
Scott really wants to play them, but then like can't justify it. Those are the players that you want. So maybe consider playing some.
You're missing my next favorite. Only two more quarterbacks I want to talk about. Okay. One is favorite standalone quarterback, and the other is a game stack I want to go on. So like maybe two quarterbacks.
All right. Well, let's. Why don't you tell me who they are, or do you want me to guess? Do you want me to guess who they are?
Yeah, I'll give you one guess.
My one guess will be Kyler.
No. All right. So it's Kirk Cousins. The dude hit 20 DK in 6 of his last 8 games, despite leaving one of those games early. Over his last 13 games, he averages 30 DK fantasy points per game in his top 50% of games. So really good on DraftKings with that 3-point bonus for 300 yards. Oh, that's on FanDuel now too, right?
The bonus is there now.
Oh man. Yeah. I almost forgot about that. You worry about the Achilles injury, and I'll say like, he's not a top value, but it's like Drake London is, Kyle Pitts is, Darnell Mooney is. So the stack is just really easy. The bringbacks probably George Pickens. I will say I will say I like this better before the Justin Fields news, but it's just everyone wants to play those guys. No one wants to play the quarterback. It's weird. And then the game stack, I'm definitely alone on an island here, but I don't know why, is Dak Prescott plus pass catchers, Deshaun Watson plus pass catchers. From week 6 on, only Josh Allen averaged more fantasy points per game than Prescott. Lamb led all players at all positions, including quarterbacks, in fantasy points per game. Brandon Cooks is going off. Ferguson was going off. It's not a good matchup, but it's like none of those guys are getting played. And then Deshaun Watson, I think he stinks. I think he's a little banged up, all that stuff. But I mean, he was putting up fantasy points last year, 18.3 fantasy points per game, 28.4 rushing. And then Joe Flacco was a top 3 fantasy point per game quarterback as a replacement. Nick Chubb's still out. Upgraded receiving core. And Chris has the Browns projected to lead the league in plays per game this year. And like, that's what we've heard from the coaching staff. So someone just brought up an Amari Cooper revenge game. It's just weird, like not a value, but like no one's playing it. I mean, hey, we were just talking about winning Millie Maker lineups in the second half last year. How many Prescott Lamb teams were there?
I mean, that's a really interesting point, because I did a full game by game written breakdown and did not include Dak as a quarterback who I'm playing this week. But you make a good point that is like, so obviously the downside is the defenses. Both defenses in the game are good. So then you think, well, it's just going to be, they're going to be slugging it out. They'll probably put up some points because the offenses might also be good. But like, it's so tough when you are battling those defenses. But as a result, you have great offenses at really low ownership, which often is what ends up winning the millie. So that is an interesting note. Maybe I'll need to throw a little bit more Dallas. I don't think I'm going to be playing Deshaun Watson, but maybe a little bit of Dak, maybe do some game sacks, because you're right. Like it absolutely, this could be just a case where the great offenses beat the great defenses, and nobody wants to play it that way because there are softer matchups out there. So that's a good call out.
Yeah. Again, it's week 1. The field is going to be overconfident. And so I'm just trying to think of, pathways to a first place finish that, the field's not factoring in.
Yeah. You sort of touched on it. I know you mentioned all the quarterbacks you wanted to mention, but I do have to throw Baker Mayfield. You touched on as like a quarterback that people are playing, projecting for 8% ownership. I mean, couldn't they just eat up this Washington secondary? I mean, I know we saw Davis pointed this out to me that the Commanders defensive back that's probably going to be covering Mike Evans is like half his size. Just like, couldn't they just like, put up 4 touchdowns through the air to Mike Evans?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. So he's popping as one of our top point per dollar plays. To me, it's just like, I would rather gamble on these 1%, 2% guys than a 8% Baker. And honestly, we're probably lower than what I was looking at least a few days ago. You also worry about like Dave Canales no longer being there. He was really considered the quarterback whisperer. And before last year, what was Baker Mayfield? Like, he was signed off the street for peanuts. But yeah, I mean, it's a great, this was far and away the worst secondary in football last year. Made us a ton of money. We targeted them every week. Godwin in the slot is one of my favorite plays of the week. Mike Evans has an amazing matchup, and he really appeared to be Mayfield's go-to guy. You can play Rachaad White, who, does some work through the air. So I certainly get it. I'm not going to talk anyone off of it, but it's just the way I'd be building would be, top 3, and then guys who are 1 to 4%.
And there's no reason you can't play Mike Evans without Baker Mayfield too. So if you really like Mike Evans specifically for that matchup, you don't need to throw Baker in there. All right. Any other quarterbacks you want to talk about before we move on to running backs?
Also Mike Evans, I think he's talking about, Davis is talking about Emmanuel Forbes. That's a bench. Yeah. That's a bench player. Unless I miss something and like Michael Davis is out, then Mike Evans is like an all-in play, but I'm trying to check right now.
If that's the case, then I need to redo my write-up too, because I thought I had seen Forbes listed as a starter on the depth chart, but obviously depth charts can be wrong, so might be totally wrong about that. But
according to our wide receiver versus cornerback chart, which you could pull up if you wanted to, we have Forbes as a backup, and I based on what we saw last year, I don't think there's any way he plays this week.
Okay, all right. Well, that is a good and important note. All right, we will move on and take a look at running backs. We'll start with the chalk, talk about whether we think it's good chalk, bad chalk, how much we want to play them. And it looks like the top owned running back this week, Rachaad White, which I saw the quote was, it's Rachaad White's backfield. He's gonna start the game and he's gonna keep going. Just a lot of positive words for Rachaad White. It's funny because they've also said like, well, Bucky Irving could come in and have a bigger role. I don't know. I feel like we've gotten sort of mixed messages in that backfield overall, but this week, the most recent thing I've seen is the offensive coordinator saying, we're going to start Rachaad White and he's going to keep going. Bucky Irving will have like specially designed packages where he'll come in, but sounds like it's still the Rachaad White show this week facing that Commanders defense. How much interest do you have in a chalky Rachaad White?
Well, that quote came immediately after one from, I guess, the previous day where he was like, he was asked how the running back rotation goes. He's like, it's important to get all these running backs involved. Right. Each one serves a specific purpose. We're really high on Bucky Irving. We're really high on whoever the third guy was. And, we're going to ride the hot hand. And then the next day, a quote came out as, oh no, Rashad's our guy. Right. I don't know, man. I don't know that I really buy it. Dave Canales has always been a bell cow guy. Liam Cohen, it's tough to say. I kind of think Bucky Irvin might fit his offense better. Like, he reminds me a lot of Kyron Williams. Like, I think undoubtedly Rashad is the starter, but like, this is also a player who ranks dead last among all running backs in yards per carry over expectation. And so I don't know. I think this is kind of easy chalk to get off of. Like, if this were 2023, I'd be all in, but it's not.
Yeah, I think that ownership is a bit much on Rachaad White. He's very consistent. I feel like last year he would consistently put up like good fantasy scores and not very often like break the slate type of fantasy scores. And we can obviously have the additional out of potentially getting Bucky Irving in there this week. Number 2 there, Kenneth Walker, the second highest projected running back on the slate. New offense in Seattle. I think the indications this offseason seem to suggest that Kenneth Walker is going to be like a bell cow. Like I think he might even have a bigger role than he had last year, but we don't really know. It's a new offense and he's chalky this week. How do you feel about Kenneth Walker?
I just pulled the Rachaad White quote, by the way.
Okay.
Todd Bowles in the running back rotation. I think it'll be a game by game basis. You normally go with the hot hand, but since nobody has played yet, obviously White starts, and then we'll kind of go from there and see how the other guys are used. So yeah, I mean, week one, White's volume might be the best it'll be, but still, it seems like they were creating an out for, hey, let's put Bucky in a drive and see how he does. Kenneth Walker, that's one of my guys. That was one of my guys this offseason. Extremely bullish on him, especially this week. Historically, he was one of the most game script sensitive running backs in fantasy. That's something you're going to hear me talk about a lot. It's just really important, really impactful. Averages 17.2 DK fantasy points per game in his last 16 games that Seattle won. Good upside in some of those games. And so they're favored by 5.5 points. That's great. Matchup's great. Denver, they gave up 90 points to Miami, 110 fantasy points to Miami running backs in that one game, finished bottom 3 in fantasy points per game allowed. And then there's a chance like volume's even better. Like there's a chance he's not just game script sensitive. There's a chance he's a bell cow. I talked about this like 2 months ago as being a possibility. And then we heard the offensive coordinator say it, the NFL head coach say it, teammates saying it. It's that they think he can be an every town back. They think he's underrated in the passing game. They think the more you get him the ball, the better this offense is going to be. I like Ryan Grubb a lot. I think we should expect a massive efficiency boost. But he, and particularly the defensive minded head coach, are really like kind of old school pound the rock guys who want to establish the run. So Kenneth Walker's, did I write him up as my favorite? Yeah. My favorite running back play. For tournaments, if you wanted to fade him, you could look at Javonte Williams. You can say, because that's another one of the most game script sensitive running backs in fantasy, at least last year. Maybe he's a bell cow this year. Benjamin Albright thinks so, but plenty of other Denver beat writers disagree. And so you would just get positive correlation if Denver came out to an early lead, Javonte would benefit and Walker presumably would flop. But I don't know. I really like Kenneth Walker. I agree 24% is high, but he was my favorite play. So
Alvin Kamara facing the Panthers, traded away Brian Burns, should not be a very good defense. Alvin Kamara seems to have the backfield to himself now. Kendry Miller on IR. Jamal Williams just not that good. I think that they're going to be feeding Alvin Kamara quite a bit. Saw 14 targets 2 different times last year. How do you feel about chalky Alvin Kamara this week?
Yeah, I'm not playing a chalky Kamara. He's old, he's dusty, horrible efficiency last year.
Yeah.
He Taysom Hill is the goal line back and playing more running back than ever before. I do love this OC. Really bullish on the OC. His dad had like 19 seasons as an OC, and like his team is ranked top 3 in rushing yards in every one of those seasons. Some insane stat like that I had. But ultimately, yeah, I just can't get aboard at that ownership. And we were just talking about game script sensitivity. Kamara is a player who does better in negative game script. They're favored this week. And so you just rattled off the stat about the targets, but like, he is 3 times as many targets in games the team has lost than games won. So I don't think it's a great spot for him. But maybe I'm just wrong, but just because I don't love the player, but 20% is tough for me.
So the way you feel about Kamara is sort of how I feel about Chuba Hubbard. I mean, he's only 5,300, and they've said like they want to prove to us how dedicated they are to establishing the run. I don't know. It feels like Chuba is going to be fed here, but also not a great matchup against New Orleans, and he's getting 19% ownership. How do we feel about 5,300 Chuba Hubbard for large field tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, I could really see him being a bell cow this week, just given Rachaad White's usage and everything we've heard from Dave Canales, typically like mostly about Jonathan Brooks. But it's just look at what Rachaad White did last year. Top 3 in carries, top 3 in snaps, top 3 in targets. It's a really valuable role. Like even on a bad offense, game script doesn't matter if you're getting the target volume. So he's clearly a great like point per projected touch value. I guess the one thing I would say is you can kind of make a similar argument for Devin Singletary, who's drawing a lot lower ownership because he's being hyped up as a bell cow. I think maybe halfway through the season, Tyrone Tracy steals quite a bit of work, but right now he's being hyped up as a bell cow. He had a 70% snap share over his last 25 games with Brian Daboll. That didn't amount to very many fantasy points, but Josh Allen doesn't target running backs. He steals all the touchdowns. And the implied total for the Giants is sneaky high, quite a bit higher than Carolina. So better matchup. So that could be a play for you. But yeah, there's a lot of good value this week. So I don't know that Hubbard's needed at 19%, but if you look at our projections, like you'll see why he ranks there.
Javonte Williams, somebody that I early in the week had a lot of interest in, just because, largely due to things that you pointed about Sean Payton's offenses in the past, like how awesome of a spot it is for running backs. Typically they just end up being, the highest scoring running back rooms year after year with Sean Payton. I didn't end up even writing up Javonte Williams this week because they're projected their implied team total is so low this week. I don't know. I think I might be just totally wrong to not be in on Javonte Williams. I know you also, I believe in our cage match, you drafted Jaleel McLaughlin. Are you going to be playing any of either of them? Javonte Williams, 12% projected ownership. Jaleel McLaughlin, I actually haven't looked at it, but I'm presuming a lot lower ownership.
He's
How much
1%.
interest do you have? Yeah, 1%. How much interest, if any, do you have in Denver running backs for large field GPPs?
Yeah, again, this was the usage last year. Maybe it's different this year, but last year he averaged 4 fantasy points per game in losses. He would come off the field for P. Ryan and Jaleel McLaughlin. So I can't get on board with this. Maybe Ben Albright's right, and he's a bell cow, and in which case he was one of the best redraft picks you could have made. But I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical of that. Jaleel, I think, is interesting. He's just because he's so cheap. He's 4,400. He's going to really allow for unique builds. And, if the role is what he had last year plus P. Ryan, he's a great value. Historically, Sean Payton RB2s are more valuable than the RB1s for a lot of teams. So I think he's interesting. No one's talking about him. 4,300, again, really unique build. Although there's a player right below him who I really love, but yeah, I think he's not someone I'm jamming in, but he's interesting.
So I assume you're talking about Raheem Mostert, which was the next spot that I was going to go to, because we have Devin Achane projected for 13% ownership. He's 6,800. Raheem Mostert, 6,400, projects for 2% ownership. So everybody is ready to buy the new toy, play with their new toy, Devin Achane. People are forgetting, in my opinion, about Raheem Mostert, who scored 21 touchdowns last year. Am I right? Is it Raheem Mostert that you're interested in? How would you split your backfield ownership here?
Yeah, so it's both of them. I do really I think Achane should be above 13%. You just look at what he did last year. You look at his spike weeks. You look at this is a guy I was saying I'm stealing this from Danny Kelly, who said this before Achane was ever drafted, but this is the Tyreek Hill of running backs. And I did a podcast with Miami's best beat writer, Travis Wingfield. And he was saying this is a Christian McCaffrey type player. He's never seen anyone look this good in practice outside of Tyreek Hill. This could be the number 3 receiver for Miami. And then this is also the player who just set the NFL record for yards per carry in a single season. So insane upside. But what this beat said, and I also think is right, is that it's still going to be a committee backfield. He's going to get more work than he saw last year, particularly as a receiver, but it's still going to be a split backfield. And so Raheem Mostert at 2%, he's an even better value on FanDuel actually. But I still like him on DraftKings. 2% is like insane for a player who scored 21 touchdowns last year. He got hurt in week 16, but like up until that point, the only players with more fantasy points were Keenan Allen, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, all guys you were drafting in round 1, and Keenan. Really good upside, averages 25 DraftKings fantasy points per game in his top 50% of games over his last 20. Crazy upside, no one on him. I think he's an amazing play. Leverage on Tyreek.
Yeah. I was just pulling up, just looking. I thought this was an interesting stat here. I'll pull it up over here if I can. Explosive run rate last year. So Raheem Mostert, 6.7% explosive run rate, 6th in the entire NFL among running backs who had at least 100 rushing attempts. Yet he was like almost just a little over half of Devin Achane, 12.6% explosive run rate last year. That is so insane. That number is just,
dude, he's a small sample, but such a freak. Raheem Mostert has played his entire career with Mike McDaniel. We know he's an amazing fit for that offense. We know McDaniel loves him. Everyone's talking about how Achane just set the NFL record for yards per carry among all running backs with 100 carries in a single season. But Raheem Mostert ranks top 5 all time in career yards per carry. So let's not sleep on this guy.
Yeah, both very strong options. And I definitely have interest also in a projected low-owned Raheem Mostert. So I'm definitely with you on that one. I'll open it up to you now. So I've named some of the players that I think we need to talk about. And I have a few more, I guess, that I might want to pick your brain about. But do you have anybody that you are especially interested in this week that we haven't already talked about?
The only last one was Bijan Robinson, who's just sort of obvious, and he's going to be highly owned. And that's about it. I wrote up Tajay Spears, but that was mostly just because Ryan and Jake were so convicted in him. I don't know that I'm gonna have a lot. James Conner on FanDuel's really great play. Joe Mixon, James Cook, Jerome Ford. I think those were guys I wrote up. Jonathan Taylor. Those were guys I wrote up and then deleted. I think I'm gonna have a very narrow running back pool, but I have a very wide receiver pool. So I sort of need that this week.
Let me sort quickly by projection here as well, just to make sure that I'm not missing anybody. I did want to ask you about Aaron Jones. That feels like a spot where it's just, we don't know to what extent he is going to be the bell cow. Maybe he splits carries with Ty Chandler early, but I think he could have a ton of usage here. And the Vikings offense, the coaches have talked quite a bit about how impactful Aaron Jones is through the air. So that kind of gives me a little bit of extra interest if they're going to be using him quite a bit in the passing game. So I think I have some interest in Aaron Jones against the Giants defense. How do you feel about that? Do you have any interest in Aaron Jones?
Yeah, Aaron Jones might have been my highest owned running back in best ball. Him or Tyrone Tracy, maybe Raheem too, actually. But what I'm envisioning is a 2-to-1 split where 2 drives for Aaron Jones, 1 drive for Tyler.
A lot for 2024.
And not just that, but used as an every down bell cow on those drives, where, not pulled at the goal line and heavily involved in the passing game. So I can certainly see it. I don't know. He ultimately didn't get a write-up from me, but I like the player. Don't worry too much about the matchup. Honestly, with the pass rushers they added, maybe that just means more target volume. And who else are they going to target, right? Because Addison's banged up, Hawkinson isn't there as the check down.
Right.
Naylor's banged up, so that's probably a good call.
Chris Ostro says, you guys cover most of the guys. I was curious about any thoughts on the Bengals backfield. Yeah, I was debating bringing up the Bengals backfield because we've got, Chase Brown is listed as the kick returner, Zach Moss the starter. Sometimes during the offseason, Chase Brown seemed to be the starter though, running with the ones. I don't know what to make of that backfield. How do you think it breaks down? Do you have any interest in either of them?
Yeah, not really. I think it's going to be close to a 50-50 split. Maybe Moss leads in carries, but Brown plays more snaps and averages more XFP. I don't know. It's just tough to get too excited about.
All right, so not an exciting spot for you. All right, so have we covered all of the running backs we need to cover here, you think?
Yeah.
Okay, I think so too. All right, move on to wide receivers. And we will, of course, start with the chalk. Andre Yoshevich, min-priced. We have T. Higgins, doubtful. And then Jamar Chase, his quote is, if I play, I'm probably going to be limited, which that's one of those things like, I don't know what's going on there. What do you mean? He's not hurt. It's just a contract thing. But he says if he plays, he's probably going to be limited. Doesn't make any sense to me. What are we doing with Andre Yoshevich here?
Yeah. Did you know he is the 8th best odds to lead the league in receiving yards this week?
Andre Yoshevich?
on DraftKings Sportsbook. Yeah, he's tied with Cooper Kupp for 8th.
That's insane.
Best. It is insane. It really is insane. You could do a lot of things here. You could just not play him.
Yeah.
You can pivot to a similarly priced Jalen Naylor or Adonai Mitchell, or I don't know. There's a bunch of like Greg Dortch, a bunch of cheap options. You can try and get direct leverage by playing Mike Gesicki, who's also a great value. One of Cincinnati's best beat writers, Joe Goodberry, thinks Gesicki is going to benefit the most. You could just kind of play none of them. I'm hearing, I was high on Burrow. I was really high on Burrow. I'm hearing really weird things from my sources on Burrow and how he looked in training camp. But yeah, man, I mean, like, must play for cash, far and away the best point per dollar wide receiver we have. But it might be worth getting away from that at 32%.
I was just watching. I watched a little clip of Burrow yesterday because he was on a podcast. I think it was Ryan Clark's podcast, and Ryan Clark was asking him like, "How are you feeling? How's the wrist, whatever?" And he was like, "Oh man, I feel the best I've ever felt. He said I think I'm better. No, he said I think I'm better than ever." But then he went on to say, "My wrist is coming along." Like it didn't sound quite as so. It sort of sounded like he's just trying to hype himself up. My wrist is coming along, but he thinks he's better than ever. He also noted that this is his first like full training camp in like 3 or 4 years. He's missed several in a row. So I don't know. You kind of sold me on Joe Burrow in best ball season. I think, and I thought he looked pretty good in the clips that I've seen from preseason stuff. I think he looked like he can still, get under it, get some air under the ball. So I think I'm still in on Burrow, but it's also not the best matchup with the Patriots defense. How do you feel about like the departure of Bill Belichick? Are they still going to be as good this year without Bill Belichick as the head coach? I can't decide whether I think this defense is going to be as good as it ever was because a lot of the same players.
I think they're absolutely going to be worse. I think Bill Belichick is like easily one of the most brilliant minds in football history, especially on the defensive side. I don't think that's up for debate. I don't think that's at all questionable. It's basically going to be the same scheme, but the defense did get a little bit worse. I don't think this is a good defense. And yeah, you lose like the greatest legend in the sport, like probably the best defensive coordinator in football. Yeah, that's not going to be good.
Yeah, it seems like, I'm the scariest part about the Bengals this week is that Patriots defense, but I think I'm with you that it's probably going to take a step backward without Bill Belichick. We'll see. This is a good point from Rims and Tims. Why is everyone ignoring Trenton Irwin? I think, Trenton Irwin, you got Charlie Jones there. Other ways, you mentioned a few ways that we could play the Bengals, get a little bit different from Andre Yoshevich. Do you have any interest in the other tertiary options, the other receivers there?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. He's just more expensive. Jermaine Burton might even be in play. I think the team hates him. Like there was a clip where he's falling asleep in meetings.
Yep.
But I mean, he's probably more talented than anyone else. He was drafted high, and he would have been drafted higher if he wasn't such a headache off the field. Yeah, probably not going to play Trenton Irwin or maybe Gesicki again. But I'm worried Gesicki might be owned. We have him low right now, but
Before we move off of Andre Yoshevich, but just to put a bow on Yoshevich himself, do you think if you play one lineup in a large field GPP this week, would Yoshevich be in that one lineup?
It just depends on how that build looks versus a different build. The whole thing with Yoshi is really just that ownership.
Yeah. All right. Tyreek Hill, the second chalkiest play on the slate. Decent matchup with Jacksonville. I wouldn't call it an elite matchup, but Miami has one of the highest implied team totals on the slate. He is 8,700, which I think might be the second highest salary on the slate behind CeeDee Lamb. What are we doing with a 31% owned Tyreek Hill?
Yeah, he's clearly like the best wide receiver play to me. With someone like him who has like legitimate like 50 fantasy point potential, I kind of don't worry too much when he's this highly owned, and like he has bury you upside. So like you might just want to play him and eat the chalk. Like I'm kind of fine with that. So I would just think about ways to get creative for lineups where I'd want to go that route. And to me, it would be, maybe Waddle. I think Waddle's popping as a really strong value in his own right. I really just think it's a Tyreek week. You can get creative with a Tua double. Like we said, that even though Tyreek's going to be popular, that's going to be lower owned. And then there's Justin Jefferson or Raheem Mostert lineups again. And then there's Justin Jefferson. And so Jalen Naylor's hurt, Jordan Addison's hurt, TJ Hawkinson is out. Again, I have bets on Darnold to lead the league in passing yards, even though he does suck and we should expect like efficiency decline. But Jefferson averaged more yards per route run without Kirk Cousins last year than with him. He's a freak of nature. I think he leads all players this week in target share. What it really comes down to, I'm not worried about the Giants secondary. What it really comes down to is like, what do you do if you're the Giants DC? You should like honestly just quadruple team him. So then the question is, how likely are they to do that? If they do it, does it even matter? Is Jefferson just so good that it doesn't? Because he might be. And so ultimately, I think he's a really good play at his ownership versus Tyreek. I think Tyreek should be 31%, but Jefferson should be at least double is 6%. And so I think every single lineup I'm going to have is either going to have Tyreek or A-Chain or Mostert or Jefferson, something like that.
So you said that you think that this is okay. So I was just going to go there. You said that you think this is probably just a Tyreek week. So last year I said, several times on this show that I like Jalen Waddle as a leverage play on all the Tyreek Hill ownership. And it basically never got there. Jalen Waddle's one.
Didn't Ricky D make a meme of you?
He did. Yeah, he did. Well, I don't know if it was about me, but I think it was about the several of us doing the same thing where it's just like, seems pretty obvious, really low owned Jalen Waddle has slate breaking upside. He has that kind of talent that he could obviously break a slate. And then the only time he actually broke a slate was when he was chalk with Tyreek Hill out. So didn't quite get there last year. But he actually has reasonable ownership. I mean, up to 17% projected ownership on Jalen Waddle. How would you feel about playing them together, Waddle and Hill?
Yeah, again, I like it. I remember I like Tua. So yeah, Tua doubles obviously make a lot of sense, but I don't know that I'm going to play him without Tua.
Okay. Yep. That seems reasonable. You also mentioned earlier that you like Kirk Cousins in part because of all of his pass catchers looking pretty good. Drake London here, 23% projected ownership at 6,000 feels like a very, very good cash play. I don't know if I like 23% ownership. How do you feel about Drake London?
I think he's an easy fade for GPPs. I think he's an easy fade. And so I don't feel great about this. We actually went to war. I went to war with Chris Wecht over this and Jake Tribby. They're both cornerback nihilists. They don't really care too much about wide receiver versus CB. But that's kind of how I started in the industry. I wrote an article under Mike Clay about this. And I think it's on the whole in the aggregate, doesn't matter, but at polar extremes, it really matters. And this is a polar extreme matchup. So he's going to get shadowed by Joey Porter Jr. This is an elite level prospect, according to Brett Whitefield. Joey Porter was great through the first 8 weeks of the season and ranked like top 5 in fantasy points allowed per snap and coverage, but didn't shadow. And then he started shadowing. From week 9 on, he shadowed Amari Cooper, DK Metcalf, DeAndre Hopkins, Jamar Chase, Hollywood Brown, T. Higgins, Stephon Diggs. Those players combined to score 11.8 fantasy points per game. That was 20% below expectation. Only T. Higgins outscored his expectation, and with 25, and then 15 of those came on just one play against someone else's coverage. And so I see this as a ceiling limiting matchup. And so when you factor in that 23% ownership, I think that's an easy fade.
Yep. So we are on the same page there. Again, I think fine. What about cash? So I said I think he's a good cash play. The price seems low for a guy who was going at the back end of round 1, early round 2 in a lot of best ball drafts. But are you concerned enough about the matchup that would take you off of him for cash?
Yeah, I think I mean, not off of, no, he's a cash play, but it's like, do I like Chris Godwin more? I think so. It's close. I think so. Do I like Neighbors more? I think so. It's really close for me. That's how I had it. I had them both above, but again, it's really close.
So Chris Godwin is somebody.
Oh, and well, actually, what makes it easy for cash is I'm playing Kyle Pitts. So, so yeah, I do like Neighbors. I do like Godwin above him.
So I was looking at Godwin's stats because in my mind he was great towards the end of last year, and he was like good at the end of last year, but he never actually like put up. He had I think 1 25-point game, but that was basically it. Like he was mostly putting up like mid-teens. But this year they've talked about using Godwin more in the slot. Is that the reason you're in on Godwin? Do you think he's just too cheap for this matchup? He's kind of leverage against, I guess we don't have a ton of ownership going to Mike Evans. But Godwin, is he somebody that you like for large field GPPs this week?
Yeah, I think he's great. So Liam Cohen has said he's going to play the Cooper Kupp role in his offense, which like, I know Godwin's no Cooper Kupp, but like that's such an insanely valuable role to have. And then he said he's going to be full-time slot this year. You look back at like Chris Godwin the last 3 years, in games he cleared like 60% of his snaps from the slot. He averaged like 19.9 fantasy points per game. In all other games, he averaged like 12.1. So that's a huge boost for him. It's last year's worst secondary in football, so it's a good matchup. Although actually their slot corner is pretty good, but a rookie playing his first game, and it doesn't really matter if you have that schemed Cooper Kupp type of usage. So yeah, I like him a lot. I think he's a great play.
I guess we can continue. I skipped some of the chalky plays. Specifically, I mean, we've got Christian Kirk to talk about, Romo Dunze, Malik Neighbors, who you did bring up. We should probably touch on them at least briefly. Christian Kirk playing in that same Miami game. I think a lot of people will be probably game stacking that. Jacksonville, Miami, and Christian Kirk obviously going to be a piece that gets into a lot of those, projected for 17% ownership. How are we feeling about Christian Kirk at 5,500, 17% ownership?
Yeah, I wasn't super excited about it, especially at this ownership. But I did have to dig deeper into it. You call me the Rashid Shaheed whisperer, but I was also the Christian Kirk whisperer last year and a few other guys like that. And that was because he averages twice as many fantasy points per route run against man coverage than zone over the last 2 seasons. So I wanted to dig into that, dig into a few other things. But how's his health too? He's
latest I've seen is that he's playing.
Yeah, I know that. But like, is
healthy,
he playing but limited? So I wanted to ask our injury expert Edwin Porras a little bit more about that. But to me, no, he's a fine play. He didn't stand out to me as a 17% play. So I just think there's better value, especially better value at lower ownership you can get.
Romo Dunze is 4,000. I think he's not playing in 2 wide receiver sets, but probably they'll run. He's like enough. A 66% snap share, 60 to 66% snap share guy. Okay. So how do you like him at 4,000? Obviously he has the talent. He has Caleb Williams throwing him the ball. We talked about it's not the matchup that you like. I think of Tennessee as being a great matchup for opposing passing games, but I think that they actually improved a bit this offseason. They, like you said, might be a little bit underrated. How much do you want to be playing Romo Dunze, and then do you like any of his teammates as leverage off of the chalk on the $4,000 Odunze?
No, Chicago's kind of tough to figure out. I think Jake and I had it as like slight hair to Keenan, mostly due to ownership, but nothing about the matchup really pointed us one way or the other. The argument against Odunze is like, so John Proctor has a rule where it's like never play rookie wide receivers in week one. The only exceptions to that were like rookie Jamar Chase and rookie Malik Neighbors. And again, snaps are going to be limited, but I think this is a like elite prospect. Like I think Odunze might, like the second he steps on the football field, like immediately be a better player than like Drake London, who everyone wants to play. Like I think that's kind of how talented he is. But it is tough with like a 60 to 66% snap share. Kind of caps your upside. Although they do have amazing rapport. This is a player like Caleb begged them to draft. He's fine. Not going to be a guy I have a ton of.
So this is Chris Oster says they got Snead now. That guy is scary. L'Jarius Snead was a very good cover back last year. Now he's on Tennessee. Do you think he's going to be shadowing Keenan, DJ Moore, anybody? Or are you expecting shadow coverage for L'Jarius Snead? Does that maybe funnel it to one of the other receivers? Does that impact you at all?
Yeah, I think we have L'Jarius Snead shadowing, but I talked to some other people, including a friend who's a Tennessee beat who's a little more uncertain about it.
Okay.
But yeah, so lean at ownership would be Keenan, but again, it's none of those guys really stand out to me as like an amazing play. Odunze certainly the top value, but that seems factored into ownership.
And when you say shadowing DJ Moore, is what is the
DJ
that's
Moore
sort of up in the air? Okay.
Shadow, yeah.
Okay. And then you mentioned Malik Neighbors. I mean, you mentioned Johnny Proctor's rule of not playing rookie wide receivers in week one, and then we're considering Malik Neighbors in cash in GPPs, projecting for 15% ownership. So where do you land on Malik Neighbors for GPPs this week?
Yeah, he was one of my Exodias and redraft leagues. I just like love the player. I love the talent. I love the fit with the Giants. I know people don't like that doesn't stand out as like a great place with like Daniel Jones, who sucks, but it's just this is a yak god who I think is going to get peppered with screens and other forms of manufactured touches, bolstering his PPR floor. I think he's going to do work after the catch to actually turn those into, positive points. And then I think he could just be like an elite outside wide receiver one. In addition to that, where he, already steps on, like first time on an NFL football field, is separating, getting open at will. I just like love the player, love the talent. They have no one else to throw the ball to. So I think target share should be high. And so you can like contrast him with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like they were comparable prospects to me. Marvin Harrison, obviously a lot more expensive, but like Bills are a bad matchup. Vikings are a great matchup. The implied point total for both teams is basically tied. Like we know Arizona's offense is way better than New York's, but like basically tied implied point total. And so, yeah, I think this is a guy we might see as a rookie, first ever game, walk into 8 to 12 targets.
All right, so we're seeing an exception to the rule with Malik Neighbors. You mentioned that we want to get back to talking about those Texans receivers because you and I are both super in on CJ Stroud. That's obviously a situation, like Chris says, Nico, Tank, and then I also Stephon Diggs, another guy that we need to be considering. How do you break it down? How do you like? Who do you have the most interest in of those Texans receivers?
Yeah, so I don't have a great answer for you, but this is something I certainly want to talk about. So I think Tank Dell far and away the best GPP play. I think honestly he's maybe one of the best GPP plays of the slate in general. It's only 5,500. That's 1,800 less than when he got hurt in week 13 of last year. 1,200 less than Diggs, 1,500 less than Nico Collins. This is the ass man. He had the best ass in football last year. This is CJ Stroud's BFF. They have amazing chemistry. He has a propensity to, make big plays. Like he can hit 3x value on just one play in this game. I can easily see that happening. When you're elite at separating, that's kind of what you do. The issue is, I was looking at his preseason usage, and he was like very clearly the wide receiver 3. So like in games active last year, he had a higher route share than Nico Collins, like by a pretty good margin. But in preseason this year, his route share dipped to 60%, which is like brutal.
Yeah.
And Nico Collins jumped to 93%. Still, nonetheless, like favorite GPP play on this team, one of my favorite on the slate, Nico Collins. I also was like legitimately excited to play it. And this all goes back to like the cheat code that was CJ Stroud stacks last year with like the MME, just picking 2 pass catchers at random, making like 10 of those lineups. And so, like I said, 93% route share in the preseason this year. That's up from 66%. So if he had that usage last year and he kept his yards per route run, would have led the league in yards per game with like 40 more than he had last year. Like that's just like a massive boost. He also gets cover 3. He was the best wide receiver in football last year against cover 3. He tagged Indianapolis for 146 and 195 yards in his 2 games against them last year. And so he's not like 7K, not an amazing value, but like if you just look at upside projections, I think he is. But here's where it gets tricky. So I'm not a great sources guy. I try and work sources, but like my Houston sources are legit. And I was talking to my Houston source last night, and he was telling me, like, I wish I can go update my rankings in my redraft article for this, but it's illegal. I can't do it. He was telling me Diggs easily leads the team in catches this year.
Wow.
The team calls Nico their wide receiver 1, but just where Diggs works in space is like easily going to lead the team in catches. And honestly, he looks amazing. He looks like the best player in practice every single day of camp, which is crazy. Like Collins looked amazing, made all that money. Tank Dell's the ass man. Apparently Diggs looks easily like the best receiver out there. So, and no one has that. No one has this information I'm giving you. I typically don't trust my sources, even like the really good ones all that much. And so it might be worth just playing just because where's Diggs at? 4%?
4% projected.
Yeah. So people don't have that. Ultimately, I think it just comes back to CJ Stroud, amazing play, +2, and just try and let the opto figure that out for you.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm playing it. It's just a lot of 2-man stacks for CJ Stroud. I don't think I'm doing 3-man. So I think that's a little bit too much for large field GPPs, asking too much for, 3 different receivers to get enough. But I think I'll be doing a ton of CJ Stroud 2-mans, and they're going to be spread out quite a bit. I think I like Diggs the best when you factor in ownership. And that's even before hearing from your source. That's obviously promising, though. It's funny you call yourself not a big sources guy, and you're like easily the best sources guy I know. You have way more sources than anybody else I know. So
you're wrong a lot, though. That's the thing. Like,
okay,
I told you my story about Tyler Higbee. That all right, we don't have to get into it.
Yeah.
Like you could talk to like the player, and they can tell you something, and they'll be wrong.
Yeah, that is true. Colts receivers: Michael Pittman, AD Mitchell. We have no Josh Downs this week, which makes it a little bit easier. But Pittman projected for 13% ownership at 68. Are they just going to funnel the ball to Pittman, or do you think they're going to spread it around?
Yeah. So the reason why I called my Houston source is because I was worried, or a few Houston sources actually, was because I was worried Stingley would shadow Pittman. He didn't shadow it all last year. During the regular season, he spent 95% of his time just lined up to one side. So like incredibly uncreative usage. And then in the playoffs, he did shadow, and he was great at shadowing. And this is like a top 5 cornerback last year by any stat you want to look at. And so to me, logically, you would be stupid not to shadow. But I'm hearing he's just going to stick to his side this week. So that was a big, big concern for me for Pittman. Apparently, we could just throw that out the window. And so I've been Downs over Pittman all year in redraft. But without Downs, like the equation changes so dramatically. Pittman averaged 0.61 fantasy points per route run with Downs off the field, 0.39 when Downs is on the field. Basically, that equates to 20 fantasy points per game versus 12.8. So like if there's any week to play Pittman, it would be this week. And Obviously, ownership really likes him. Adonai Mitchell works as a pivot, but I don't know. It's really tricky. The counter argument would be, hey, all the stats you were looking at last year was from Gardner Minshew, hyper accurate quarterback, especially in the short to intermediate portion of the field. And then now we have a run first quarterback who is famously inaccurate, especially to the short to intermediate area of the field. So I think you can get away from him, but that Josh Downs stats kind of keeps me thinking twice about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. AD Mitchell, 3,800 comes in at 3%. Also is a rookie quarterback in week 1. So I guess Johnny Proctor would say, don't go out and play AD Mitchell. But I think this could also be, I don't know, somebody that I would consider as a potential exception to the no rookie wide receivers in week 1, just because we have Josh Downs out, could step into a bigger role there. DK Metcalf, JSN, any interest there?
Yeah, I think they're good values. I think that's like a good argument for Geno Smith, who Chris's projections love. My preference, I think, would be JSN. I think Ryan Grubb is going to be great for him, because you look at what Rome Odunze did last year. That's presumably DK Metcalf's role. This is like stellar, but when Jalen McMillan was healthy in the slot, really targets per route run were very similar and like far above Jalen Polk, presumably Tyler Lockett in that role. And so Denver has like one of the worst secondaries in football. Really poor, except for one player who's elite. That player's Patrick Surtain, who I think is going to shadow DK Metcalf this week. Tyler Lockett is also hurt, dealing with a thigh injury. I've talked about this for years. Lockett never plays well through injuries. He's also 31 years old. Noah Fant is also hurt. Pharaoh Brown's also hurt. So it really smells to me like a JSN week. And then who else did you ask me about? Was it just DK and JSN?
Yeah, I just asked about those two. But you mentioned, Tyler Lockett, 5,400. He always just like catches the ball and just falls to the ground immediately. So maybe when he's playing hurt, it'll be even more so. He's going to fall, just not even take a step before he falls if he's playing through injury. I JSN, the other one that I asked you about there. But I should open it up to you just more generally. Any receivers that are not super chalky that you have interest in for GPPs?
Well, you missed a cash play, and every time you miss a cash play, for GPPs,
what happens?
He goes nuclear. So I'll give you one last guess. Or actually, honestly, there's two of them. Looking at this now, there's probably two of them.
Well, okay, I didn't miss a cash play. I skipped past the we talked about the major chalk. Yeah, I want to skip past the major chalk.
Okay. Right. So Deontay
Okay,
Johnson's clearly one of them. 5,300. This was one of my Exodias. If you don't know Yu-Gi-Oh, the way Exodia works is you assemble 5 pieces and you automatically win. So he was one of the. Oh, actually, he was probably 6th, if I'm being totally honest. But I loved the player. He ranked like wide receiver 24 for me, and he's wide receiver 30 on the slate in terms of pricing. Not an amazing matchup, slight chance Marshawn Lattimore shadows, but I think probably not. But it's an amazing schematic matchup. Deontay Johnson twice as efficient against man than zone. Also really like him in this Dave Canales Alpha X role. Was very creative last year with how he used Mike Evans. I could see Deontay in a similar way. Only concern, and I'm half laughing at myself about it, but like legitimately concerned about Adam Thielen, an amazing matchup. Like I think Adam Thielen's dust, but like if you would ever worried about Thielen, it would be week 1 before his body just totally falls apart. But no, I have Deontay Johnson as like a top 3 cash play. So obviously like him at tournaments, only 12%. That's not bad at all. And another player I was thinking about putting in cash, but like at a bare minimum, like amazing play for tournaments, is Josh Palmer. So I made a case for him earlier this offseason that he's this year's Nico Collins. Justin Herbert missed like a ton of practice time, has brand new weapons. Palmer's the only guy to ever score 2 or more touchdowns with him. Lad McConkey is probably slot only at this point of his career. He's always hurt. Great player, but slot only, always hurt. DJ Chark is out. Quentin Johnson's terrible. He was the most ass of any wide receiver in ass.
And that's a good thing, by the way, for those who don't know.
Not good.
You want to be ass. Wait, I thought you were referring to the stat ass. He
was the most ass at
Am
ass.
I misunderstanding? Okay. Oh, he has bad. Josh Palmer is bad at ass. Okay, I was
the worst.
I was trying
the worst ass.
Explain.
The worst
okay,
ass.
he had the worst ass of any ass. Okay, that's good to know.
And so the team is going to be more run heavy this year, but it's like there's no one else. Herbert's awesome. They have good rapport, better efficiency this year. So I love those guys.
Terry McLaurin was brought up.
Yeah, he would be the third one I'd mention.
Yep.
Obviously. It's like I love Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is my boy. And so if Daniels goes off, like someone is probably going to come along with him. And who else would that be but Terry McLaurin? Pricing came out before the Jahan Dotson trade. And so that one's another easy one for me.
I think sometimes we see these rushing quarterbacks, and I think I sometimes have the bias of assuming they're not going to be as good of passers, and that's just not the case. If you look at the college numbers for Jaden Daniels, he was just so good. 4 interceptions his senior year, threw for 4,000 yards, something insane. He was really, really good last year. So sometimes I'm like, I don't really want to play Terry McLaurin with his rushing quarterback, but I think you got to remember that Jaden Daniels is actually a really, really good passer last year too. So I'm probably going to be in on Terry McLaurin as well.
Chris Olave and Calvin Ridley. Their issue is just there's a lot of guys in those price ranges who are a hair better or more than a hair better, but like they're still good plays, and I could see them being on the winning Millie lineup. So wanted to give them a shout. Probably Ridley a little more than Olave, because Neil, you call me the Rashid Shaheed whisperer, don't you?
I do call you that. And
so why is that? It's because he's one of the most scheme sensitive wide receivers in fantasy. He's so much better against zone coverage than man coverage. More efficient than Olave straight up against zone. So Carolina ranked top 3. They retained the same DC, ranked top 3 in zone coverage last year. So 4,400, 4% ownership. New and improved play caller. No Michael Thomas. I could see him going off. Oh, and Darnell Mooney, I guess, would be the last one. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, Rashid Shaheed, you tagged me in a tweet about Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave earlier this week, which I appreciated. Yeah, it looks like it should be a great spot for Rashid Shaheed. We're already expecting him to have a bigger role this year with no Michael Thomas there. He's always been sort of like a part-time player. I think most of us are anticipating that Rashid Shaheed is just the wide receiver 2 for the Saints this year, so should have a bigger role already, and now gets the type of matchup that he's been able to exploit in the past. So definitely feels like a great play this week. Somebody just brought up a player that I was about to. Devontae Adams is a player that I have some interest in against the Chargers this week. Probably going to be super low owned. I don't know. Do you have interest in a fairly expensive Devontae Adams? But he's Devontae Adams, so probably worth the price tag. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought about it. Our producer Trey Camerling, who binked a few tournaments last year, or binked one. He's all in on Devontae Adams and Charger stacks this week. To me, I just didn't see the point when Jefferson was 6%. But
you just prefer Jefferson. Yeah.
There's what's the narrative? Like the Chargers made a mean tweet about him or something.
Oh, I'm not aware of the narrative. That's good to know though. Now I'm all
about a tweet or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think I remember this narrative. Romeo was asking about Michael Pittman. I think we covered Pittman.
Yeah.
Already. So yeah, rewind, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. All right. Any other wide receivers that you feel you need to talk about here?
Mooney. I like Mooney.
Oh yeah.
Especially with the London shadow.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your Mooney love, because you loved him in best ball. Also, you've been pretty in on Mooney all off season. What is it about Mooney that you like?
It's a team that could lead the league in rate of 11 personnel. So he's going to be on the field a ton. But I think he's actually easily one of the top 3 target earners on the team. Or I guess top 4 with Bijan, but Drake London going to be shadowed. So that's a tough matchup. It could funnel more volume. The hamstring injury with Kyle Pitts, like I'm kind of not worried about, but like, what if it is real or Kyle Pitts just isn't who I believe he is or want him to be? Mooney's a guy who hit 1,000 yards in a season. He has, good spike week upside. Really just like this new Zach Taylor offense. I like Kirk Cousins. And so, no one's going to play him. Leverage on London. So
2% projected ownership. Yeah, that's kind of spicy. We talked about Josh Allen earlier. I think we touched briefly on Bills pass catchers that you'd be interested in. Sounds like Dalton Kincaid is probably the one that most people are going to play Josh Allen with, just because he fills that tight end position. Do you have any interest in? I mean, Khalil Shakir sounds like is your favorite of the Bills receivers. What is your conviction level on the Bills receivers this week?
Yeah, I think that's only if I'm playing Josh Allen. Otherwise, I'm just avoiding it.
Yeah, just not a situation you really want to lean into.
Jalen Naylor, I worry about that ankle, but he's stone minimum, 0.1% owned. And so everyone wants to play Yoshi, but who had a great ass. Yoshi, amazing ass, especially in the slot, which is where he's supposed to play this year. But Jalen Naylor, way better ass. And so, TJ Hawkins is out. Addison's more banged up than he is. And so amazing leverage play off of Yoshi at 0.1% when Yoshi's like 33. So do worry about his health, but if not, he would have been one of my favorite plays. Maybe my highest owned play of the slate.
Any other receivers that you are particularly interested in that we haven't already talked about?
Not on DraftKings, no.
Oh, do you have anybody you want to call out from FanDuel?
Demario Douglas, stone minimum on FanDuel. I think he's interesting.
Okay. You're not playing Marvin Harrison fits the rule of rookie wide receiver in week 1 that you're not playing?
No. Should be a Trey McBride spot, honestly, if you dig into the coverage shell matchups.
I guess we sort of already talked about CeeDee Lamb when we were talking about Dak Prescott, but it sounded like you have some interest in playing through that game, the Dallas and Cleveland game that a lot of us are scared off of because of it's going to be tough matchups. But CeeDee Lamb coming in at just 9% projected ownership, 8,900. What's your level of interest in those receivers in that game? Any particular, any particular players that you're targeting from that game?
Yeah, I think that's like a great Millie play where it's like, no one's touching it. It's probably a slog, but what if it's not? And so I'm not going to have Lamb on lineups without the cornerbacks, but I am going to make some of those lineups, but probably just for the Millie. Probably not getting in my spy or red zone lineups.
Okay. Trey pointed out to me that the Chargers posted a picture of Davante Adams next to a box of garbage flavored Pop-Tarts, and Davante Adams got pissed about it. So I'm all in. I'm just jamming Davante Adams this week. That's enough for me. All right, I think that we've covered all of the receivers that I felt we needed to talk about. That was pretty thorough. So we can move on.
We missed that I like as like bringbacks or in game stacks, but I think we hit on the most important pieces.
Any other? I mean, you were also the Noah Brown whisperer last year. Any interest in like Noah Brown, Diami Brown? Like,
I don't think he's I don't think he's starting, and we really don't.
Okay.
Olamide Zaccheaus, I guess, as the deep threat. I kind of want to see it with Lad McConkey in the slot first, but no, it's just McLaurin.
Oh, one more that I wanted to mention, since we talked about both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, any interest in Jalen McMillan, another rookie wide receiver?
No, I really try and follow Johnny's rule.
Okay. All right, let's move on. Look at some tight ends. Kyle Pitts, the Chalk A's. He's 4,600, just too cheap for what we're expecting from Kyle Pitts this year. 24% projected ownership. How much interest do you have in Kyle Pitts this week?
I mean, he's far and away the best point per dollar play. It's not even in question.
Yeah.
But I mean, how often did we say it last year and it worked out? Is like the chalk tight end never hits. It's like
Right.
4 years in a row. The chalk tight end never hits. So that's always your argument to fade him. And it's a compelling one for tournaments. But no, like 24% is right. Like he's not bad chalk from that standpoint. It's just from a game theory standpoint. And then how would you get away from him? Evan Ingram's popping up in our optimals. Like at least a few days ago, our optimals had 2 tight end bills, which I don't love to see, but Chris is a big Evan Ingram guy. The dude ranked top 12 in targets last year. Led all tight ends in targets. Was insane down the stretch, but that was without Christian Kirk, and now Kirk is back. You could say, oh, well, Kirk's a little banged up, blah, blah, blah. I think he's a good play. I don't think he's a must play. I don't think he's significant. I think he is a good play, but I don't think he's so much better than David Njoku and Jake Ferguson that his ownership should be what it is above and beyond those other guys.
Yeah. Interesting question here. Pat Fryermuth with Justin Fields. We did see Fields target Cole Kmet quite a bit last year. Had some big blow up games. Do you have any interest in playing this through Pat Fryermuth with Justin Fields?
I don't think so. Just because the preseason usage was so bad. It was it was like Johnny with the Titans bad. Arthur Smith like committee, just zero upside.
Okay.
By route share, that's what I'm talking about.
So we don't really have any other chalky tight ends outside of Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram. It's pretty flat the rest of the way, but we've got, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, some of the better tight ends on the slate from a projection standpoint, also more expensive. Do you think this is a week where you're going to be inclined to pay up at tight end, or do you think you'd rather go with the value route?
I don't know. Define pay up. There's not really anyone to pay up for.
Over 5,000 or Kyle Pitts or higher, 4,600 Kyle Pitts or higher.
Yeah, I think I would mix it up. We could start from the bottom. I think there's some interesting plays on the bottom.
Let's do that.
Jasicki, like I said earlier, it's everyone wants to play Yoshi, but Jasicki's 3K. What's his ownership right now?
3%.
I feel like I feel like he's going to be like 9%.
Probably.
But if the way I had it in my article and my rankings was based on the 3%, he would be the best one. Where's Johnny Munt at? Because like Munt, I like straight up more point per dollar ignoring leverage. Okay, 4%. He's still low. I mean, he eclipsed a 75% snap share in each of his last 2 games last year, averaged 12.4 fantasy points per game. No TJ Hawkinson, Jalen Naylor hurt, Jordan Addison hurt. So 2,900. He's very in play. Zach Ertz, I think, is interesting. Over his last 20 games with Cliff Kingsbury, 20 full games, he averaged 7.5 targets, 12 fantasy points per game, and 83% snap share. So he's interesting. Not amazing. I like Munt more. Jasicki, depending on the ownership, but you definitely can go cheap at tight end this week.
What do you think of Geno? 3,500, 3% in that. I mean, Mike McDaniel this offseason says what we saw in the past isn't necessarily what we're going to see going forward from the tight end position. Talked about how much he likes Jonnu Smith from the yard after catch perspective. Leverage on chalky Tyreek Hill, chalky Devin Achane. No interest. I can't sell you on him.
I have negative interest. Isn't he behind Smythe on the depth chart? And
he's a backup fullback on the depth chart. Yeah.
Yeah. And like barely played in the preseason, and the number 3 option in Miami's passing attack has never hit ever. So I don't know. I'm not a Jonnu guy.
All right. You're not believing the Mike McDaniel coach speak of what happened in the past isn't necessarily what's going to happen going forward.
That sounds like the Kamala quote.
I don't think I know the Kamala quote. I don't think I know.
We can be liberated from what has been.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a politics guy.
Yeah. We also just got the question: does Brock Bowers fall under the rookie wide receiver role? Does it apply to tight ends also? Would you refrain from playing Brock Bowers week 1 against the Chargers?
Bro, if Brock Bowers gets the Isaiah Likely role, he's going to score 90 fantasy points this week. That would be the sickest thing in the world. I don't know. I'm probably not playing him. I love the player, generational talent, like overused phrase, but it fits in this instance. But I worry Michael Mayer's there. It's going to limit. He's not going to be on the field that much. What we saw with the Ravens tight ends is so rare. It's like only like one game per year do we see 2 tight ends on the same team hit 30 routes.
We saw it in the preseason, though, I believe, with Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. They were playing together quite a bit in the preseason. I think I read something that it was like you hadn't seen it since the Gronk and Aaron Hernandez days, the amount that they were playing together.
I mean, that'd be sick. I still just, I don't know. I don't see it happening. Okay. Or at least I need to be proven wrong just because it's such an outlier event.
Does that analysis apply to Michael Mayer then too, that you would not have interest? I'm not even seeing him where he is on.
Yeah, I just as a general rule of thumb that like almost always works, save for a few outliers, and it saves you some time, is just 50-50 committee backfields, especially like committee tight end situations. I kind of just ignore.
Yeah, committee tight ends. I think that, I mean, I sometimes will play committee running backs, actually frequently, but definitely tight ends. That does feel like probably a stay away spot. But then again, I don't know. I'm torn. I'm very torn on that tight end situation in particular, just because we have Brock Bowers, like you said, generational talent. He's 4,500. Seems like a pretty good matchup with the Chargers. I don't know. I might run out some, probably not a ton though. I got to say, I don't feel particularly great about any tight ends this week. So I think that's part of my struggle. Is there are some weeks where it's just like certain tight ends stand out as, oh, this is a great matchup. He's going to get looks. I'm not really seeing that this week. I feel like the tight ends that I'm generally going to want to play are all in tougher matchups. Is it just a spread it out at tight end week, or do you have anybody you feel really strongly about?
No. So when I first started with the article working on the rough draft, I'm like, oh my God, tight ends suck so bad this week. I hate this. But like revisiting it yesterday and seeing 2 tight ends combining for 41% ownership, the players I was like, he's fine or whatever, I'll write him up, then become amazing plays just because the field is going to have, 40% of the field is going to have one of these 2 guys. And so Trey McBride, I think it's a great matchup for him. This is why I love the Marvin Harrison Jr. landing spot, is like Trey McBride destroyed 2 high coverage last year. They just had no one who could do anything against single high. And then like Marvin Harrison Jr., an elite man beater, is going to shred single high. But the Bills, they're top 3 in two high coverage every single year. That's what they do. And so it's a spot for Trey McBride to absolutely feast. If you're going to play Kyler, you got to have Trey McBride. But above him, I'd say just outright ignoring game stacks, is David Njoku and Jake Ferguson.
Okay.
And so this is what we talked about on your best ball show. If you remember the elite tight end debate, and like the elite tight ends, you had your 7 tight ends, and then there's this cutoff. And I'm like, all right, that sounds fair, but like, why exactly are you cutting it off there? Because Evan Ingram, David Njoku, and Jake Ferguson, you just look at like the last 9 weeks of the season, they smashed Trey McBride in fantasy points per game. They smashed Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, anyone in fantasy points per game. Ferguson over his last 7 games, 7.6 targets per game, 15.5 DK fantasy points per game. That would have led the position. CeeDee Lamb missed just about all of training camp. And so, tight ends typically make a big leap in year 2 or year 3. So he had all offseason to build a rapport with Dak Prescott. Good touchdown upside. He led all tight ends in red zone targets, second in end zone targets last year. I think he makes a step forward this year. And then David Njoku, he closed out the season averaging 20.7 fantasy points per game over his last 5. It's like high-end wide receiver 1 numbers, low of 16.3 over that stretch. And so like everyone's just like, oh, Flacco loved him, but Deshaun Watson didn't. Judy's there, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's all fair, but it's like, I don't know that you could put that genie back in that bottle with just him being as good as he was. And so he's like comparable to Engram to me. Engram's for sure safer, but especially upside. And then you factor in Engram's 5 times his own. So yeah, I like him.
Yeah, Njoku is one that I was kind of curious about. So I went back and read some Stefanski quotes from the offseason, and they were all very high on Njoku. It was all about they want to get Njoku the ball. They're going to be forcing the ball to David Njoku. So all of that was very positive on Njoku. And like you said, it makes sense. Like, why, after he was so good towards the end of last year, why would they not focus more on Njoku this year? And honestly, seemed pretty obvious last year that it should be. So I don't know why it took them so long, but good that they're probably going to be on the right track going forward. Somebody brought up Dalton Schultz. So he's 4,900. Now that could be the ultimate troll for me with all of my CJ Stroud double stacks with the receivers. I'm not super inclined to do it, but maybe I need to do a couple just so that I don't completely die when CJ Stroud throws 2 touchdowns to Dalton Schultz. 4,900 feels pretty hefty now that they have 3 elite receivers ahead of him, but how much interest, if any, do you have in Schultz?
Man, if CJ Stroud finishes as the QB1 and Schultz scores multiple touchdowns, I would throw my shoe through the TV. Yeah. Now maybe I just need it as like an insurance policy, but so you have me nervous, but I don't know. Heading into this, I wasn't planning on playing him at all. So
yeah, no, I
think he's really the odd man out now with those 3 elite wide receivers.
But we need to do it anyway, just out of fear, because we're just going to get so slaughtered by it. I should point out, I've only said it once on the show. You can use promo code OTB20 to get 20% off any Fantasy Points product. We've referenced, we haven't really shown the data suite that much on the show, but we've referenced it several times. You just have elite data at Fantasy Points. They have people who are tracking every single game, watch every single game. They're tracking all of the data for themselves. So it's not like they're not just pulling it from the NFL's data from outside sources. They are gathering the data themselves. And it's, I think, better. It's going to look a little bit different than some of the other sources use. And in my opinion, it's better. And then of course they have a lot more stats to look at, little different ways to look at all of the data. So highly recommend signing up for Fantasy Points in general, but the data suite in particular, OTB20, you can get 20% off whatever at Fantasy Points. And then of course, as I said earlier, like elite content that is, all about the data that you can find in that data suite. So highly recommend signing up for whichever Fantasy Points package makes sense for you using code OTB20 or the little box below me on the screen. All right.
Can I step in? No, I think you guys need an all-in subscription. So the code gives you 20% off. So the all-in package goes down to $336, which is like cheaper than you find anywhere else. And we're the best. So we're the best and the cheapest, insane value. Premium plus data alone is $375. So this is cheaper than that. So you get college football for free. You get the Opto for free. You get to hang out with Neil and I in Discord. You get to read all of Neil's Showdown articles. You can read my slate breakdown. Discord is such a fun place to be. Yeah, you can watch my video with Johnny. You can hear Johnny's thoughts, one of the best, sharpest DFS players of all time. So yeah, all-in subscription, fantasypoints.com.
Yeah, relative to other DFS sites out there, just way too cheap. You want to make a couple lineups? I feel like this is we had some success last year making some lineups. We had a couple that made it inside the top 1%. So I think we need to continue to make those at the end of the show. I guess maybe before we start, should I ask, do you want to talk about defenses at all? Do you have any strong opinions on defenses you want to play this week?
Oh God.
Like you said, I think the Falcons might end up being chalky. That's been we currently don't have them ranked as too chalky here. Falcons coming in at 4% here. I mean, I would be kind of surprised if they come in that low. But
Darren's watching, so he'll probably update that within 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's probably true. So that's an interesting one. I also we've talked about the Texans defense is, I think, going to be one of the better defenses in the league this year. Playing Anthony Richardson, I don't know, seems like a decent enough spot. I think Texans are a pretty good defensive spot. Do you have any spots that stand out to you that you've been thinking about? Or
I
you just
really
wanna
need to
make
give it
lineups?
more thought.
All
I
right,
don't
let's just
think-
make some lineups.
Yeah.
Nobody really cares about defenses anyway, I don't think. So let me pull up DraftKings here. What did I do?
Actually, John Proctor is the defense goat. So I'll
Oh, is
probably
he
just
really?
play whoever he tells me to play tomorrow. Yeah.
All right, that is good to know. Hang on, I'm having issues with my computer. 1 second. I don't know. I'm not used to doing this. Okay, here. Pulled this tab. I already pulled it up, but it's on the wrong screen. All right, you can see it now. Wait, can you see it now? No.
The comment? Oh no. Yeah. Now I see it.
Okay. Now we are in here ready to make a lineup. Hang on 1 sec. Okay. We are good to go. And I'm going to let you start here. What's up, Nate? Yeah, appreciate all of you, the positive feedback in chat. Really appreciated. Once again, I'm excited to be back doing this show with Scott. This was so fun last year. Glad that we can do it again. And of course, I think we're going to come in right around 2 hours. You would ask me, how long do I think we're going to be going with these shows? They kind of got longer and longer throughout the year last year. I think towards the end of the year, it was over 2 hours every single time, but we'll try and keep it right around 2 hours, I think. I think we're in a good spot here. Who do you want to start with here? I mean, do we just start with a Stroud stack, or do you want to start somewhere else?
Yeah, I'll go Stroud with my quarterback.
And then how do you want to stack them up?
Dell. And then we'll figure out wide receiver 2 later.
Okay. Based on how much money we have left over. Okay. Running back. How are we doing this? Are you just giving me choices here? Do you want me to throw names at you?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
You want to go one chalky, one off the wall?
Yeah. I mean, we're going with a fairly off the wall stack, or at least
You're
in
right.
theory. In theory, we're going with an off the wall stack, so we can play chalk if we want to at running back.
Can I see defensive pricing again one more time? Give me Kenneth Walker. I was thinking about stacking him, but I don't think that's necessary.
I like that. Kenneth Walker in there.
And we could go really weird. Let's just go really weird right now. Let's throw in Jaleel. That's
All right.
correlated.
That is going to be weird. Not many people playing Jaleel McLaughlin at 4,300.
And then let's do Pittman and Collins. Let's see if we could fit the expensive version of this stack. And if we can't fit it, then we'll just swap Pittman out for Mitchell, or we'll swap Collins out for Diggs.
All right. So now we can, if we put in a defense, we'll have a good idea of how much money we have.
Put in Yoshi for now.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call.
Or if you want to get really weird, it is a millie. You can go Jalen Naylor.
Let's start with Yoshi, and then because I don't think we're off the wall enough that I think we're okay for now.
Exactly.
And then so we have 9,800 left over.
You want to play the chalk defense?
Who's the chalk defense? Is that
against
Texans?
the Falcons?
Oh, playing the Falcons defense?
No, against the Falcons.
Oh, you think the Steelers are going to be chalk? Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The Falcons defense against the Steelers.
Yeah.
Ugh. I was thinking about Arthur Smith, and so
yeah,
screw me up. All right.
I'm realizing that now we have a lot left over, and this is for the tight end position.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do we want to spend up? Do we want to?
No, yeah, we'll swap out McLaughlin or Yoshi.
Right.
There's plenty of things we could do.
Well, who do you want to put in at? Is that do you want to play it through McBride, or do you want to switch out?
No, I don't think I do. Let's go Munt.
All right, we'll go Munt. Now we have 3,600 left to play with. We take Jaleel McLaughlin out. We'll be at 7,900 at
it gets us Bijan, and we get the stack.
Or Jonathan Taylor.
No.
All right. Take out Jaleel. Put in Bijan. How do you like it?
I love it. We could do Jasicki, Naylor. What's Mitchell's price again?
Mitchell 3,900.
80
Mitchell. Yeah.
All right. No, I think this looks good.
All right.
Now it's your turn.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask for help on this one. I was thinking about doing $100, but I feel like I want a Stroud stack in the $100.
Oh,
And I feel like we should do something different. Should we do another Stroud stack in the $100 and then do another $5 entry?
that's a lot of pressure you're putting on me.
All right.
I wasn't prepared to do $100.
You weren't prepared. Oh, we'll do a $5.
That's a lot of money, Neil.
Yeah, we'll do another $5.
Yeah, thank you.
I kind of want to do a Tua double stack.
I like it.
I think, yeah. Just because, again, we didn't see a hit all last year. Both the receivers are pretty chalky, but I don't think a ton of people will play the combo, play both of them together.
Well, I think about every time we play Tua, I think about how last year Alex Baker shipped 2 tournaments, like large field, with Tua running back plus 2 pass catchers.
Did he really with Achane or something, or Mostert?
Mostert, yeah.
So I feel like that's.
I'm not going to do that. I just think about it.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's one of the best DFS players. Like,
yeah,
I never think to add a running back to a double stack.
I think those are high stakes, not.
Oh, you're
field,
probably right.
Yeah,
but it wasn't like the Thunderdome. It was like bigger than that.
Right. Now this would be. I mean, we tried doing Jaleel last time. We ended up taking him out. I think this one would make sense to play Jaleel at running back. And then I think we probably want to go a little bit cheaper at defense. I mean, I kind of like the Texans defense. Throw that in there. All right, so now 52-50 remaining. Tight end. I mean, should we go with Kyle Pitts in this one?
I think we can.
Yeah.
You have Jaleel. You're unique enough.
Yeah. So now we have 54-66.
I mean, you can, but 40% of the field has Pitts or Ingram.
True. Yeah. I mean, we could just go different and get a little bit more expensive elsewhere. So we played Munt in the last one. I'd rather go somewhere different than Munt. We could go Gesicki in this one.
Yeah, and no Yoshi. I like it.
Yeah. So now we have 6,000 left per player, running back, wide receiver, and flex.
Why not Mixon if you like the Texans?
That's a good call. Correlates well with the Texans defense. Now we have leverage on all of the pass catchers there, who, again, I'm playing in all other lineups, but I like that call for this one.
Now that I'm thinking about it, you might as well play Ingram
instead of Gesicki.
Yeah, because which Jaguars bring back are you going to go with? You could play Kirk, but I think I'd rather have Ingram. Okay.
Then we have 44-50 left for players. So now we could play Yoshevich again. Go back to that one. Would you have? Do you have any interest in playing Trenton Irwin or Charlie Jones or something like that? Somebody else from the Bengals receivers?
I don't think so.
Okay. So now we'll probably want to do somebody relatively inexpensive at wide receiver. Donald Mooney is there.
Yeah, I like Mooney. I like Shaheed. I like.
Yeah, Shaheed. We got to play Shaheed, I think. Right? That's
our boy.
Yeah, that's our boy.
Unless Mooney's the new Shaheed and you just jinxed it.
That's a good point. Could
JSN's up there too. He's not too much more expensive.
Yeah,
Romo Odunze.
Yeah, we could play 4,000 Romo Odunze. Gabe Davis also could be a bring back. Probably not going there.
I feel like Gabe Davis is simultaneously always a good GPP play, but always a terrible one.
I mean, what about this?
No one wants to play him because he stinks, but he doesn't always hit because he stinks.
So I just threw Darnell Mooney in there too. We don't have any other players from Atlanta. Everybody else is going to be playing Pitts and Drake London, Bijan. We don't have any of them. We play it through Mooney for leverage. We only have 300 left over if we play Mooney there. What do you think about that?
I like it, but you know what I'm thinking about?
Huh?
I'm thinking we could play Achane.
Achane. Let's see. I mean,
instead of Mixon.
That feels like
he's your former boss. Do you have his number? Let's call Alex Baker and pick his, what led you to do that?
I mean, I think that he did that with the full onslaughts more so in the like high stake stuff, where you don't need to hit the absolute nuts. You just want to like, I don't know, have a decent outcome. I feel like for a large field millie, going with for a $5 millie where you need to hit like the absolute nuts, I feel like that's a little bit too much. Okay. I could be wrong. I guess we have seen those mega onslaughts go a little bit underowned in general.
Tyreek 199 yards, 1 touchdown.
Yep.
Waddle 103, 2.
Yep.
Achane 1 rushing touchdown, 1 receiving touchdown.
That's a lot of touchdowns. Yeah. Could happen. But we already correlated Mixon with Texans.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. I you know me, I want to galley brain just a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So we made 2 there. We're good. We're good with these 2 lineups.
Yeah.
All right. So that does it. Episode 1 of Outside the Box in the books. We just crossed the 2-hour mark. That was a lot of fun, as always. Looking forward to doing these shows all year. Scott, where else can we? Are you doing any more content this weekend, or are you finally done for the weekend?
I have to wake up bright and early tomorrow morning. I am not a morning person, but I'm doing the Sunday update live stream with John Proctor. This is a paywalled live stream because John Proctor is the GOAT, and subs would get too pissed if we put it out for free. So Johnny basically reads my slate breakdown. He tells me what he disagrees with. He tells me how he's playing the slate. We just kind of bounce off of each other, and our product's so much better off for it. And so make sure you check that out tomorrow morning.
Hell yeah. And I will, of course, be writing my Sunday Night Football breakdown for Fantasy Points. Will be published on the site tomorrow. And then, of course, I'll be doing my own stream on my own channel, The Flannelverse. You can find that on YouTube as well. I believe it's in the description of the video. I know it's been in some of those as well. So yeah, check out Scott tomorrow morning. Get a little bit more Scott before once we get all the breaking news tomorrow in the morning before the main slate. Catch me tomorrow night and catch my article on Fantasy Points. And of course, use promo code OTB20 to get 20% off access for all of this stuff, all in sub for morning update. Make sure you get that to catch Scott and Johnny there. Thank you guys very much, and we will catch you next week.
Yeah, thanks so much for listening, everyone. Really appreciate it. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.